Hello, Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, and already I just started this show, and I'm already distracted. I just realized I had a spot on my glass. You'd think I would check this stuff before I go live, right? Sometimes I swear I need a keeper. Someone to just say, you need to do this, you need to do, oh my God, I swear, like a ward almost. Anyway, so there's a few things I want to talk about. Oh, there's a few things I forgot to talk about yesterday, that I just want to add, when we were talking about, Bad Bunny's speech. And, there's a part in there where he says we're all Americans. And for anybody who disagrees with that, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. And so since I think the 1920s, they have been American citizens. And anybody born on or around April of 1899 also had birthright citizenship. So, there you go. I wanted to make that very clear because a lot of people are like, yeah, but he speaks Spanish. So that's his native tongue. Okay, because Puerto Rico speaks Spanish. So get over it. All right. Neighbors right to the south speak Spanish. And I mean, I can see, as the crow flies, I can see Mexico from here, on a very clear day. Not at the moment, but, cause, high smog. But anyways, right, we're here. I am here, and I have, so I found this I'm waiting for some people to pop on. I don't know what's happening, but, I found this on Instagram yesterday, and I thought it would be something very interesting to talk about. So, I don't want to make this political. So there's certain parties or a certain faction of a party, that, is starting to implode a little bit. People who were once loyal are now just kind of, splitting. And so, that being said, we're coming into a gray area right now, and it's a gray area that I think a lot of people are just, are starting to meet in the middle, and they're getting a little, I don't want to say rambunctious, because to me that's always been kind of like, oh, you're wild, but there's going to be a lot of people doing what I hate to refer to it like this, but basically a walk of shame. And, we have to be kind. We have to, say, look, you know what? Yeah, maybe this was where you were at before, but hey, you know what? You're not there anymore. So let's just move forward. And I know that's going to be hard for a lot of people. It's going to be hard for people who are like, wow, what was I thinking? And there's going to be a lot of people going, yeah, what were you thinking? And it's like, we told you, blah, blah, blah. We got to stop. All right, we got to stop. Good morning, older sibling. I'm assuming Muddy's on. And if she is, happy birthday. Happy birthday. I failed at putting that in our group last night because I tell you, I have been so out of it. I have been so out of it for the last, I don't even know how long. And I don't know why. I feel like my head is like on a swivel, but not in a good way. Just like, almost like the Exorcist thing happening here. So anyways, I'm not sure if Muddy's on or not, but if you are, happy birthday. Happy birthday. I'll make sure I put that in the group after this. But this is what I wanted to talk about. So I don't want to wait any longer because I don't want to take up anyone's time, but then longer than I have to. But here's the thing. So the reason I just said everything I said is because in the current kind of chaotic climate that we're living in right now, extremely chaotic if you live here, kind of spreading chaos if you live elsewhere. And I wanted to talk about, people and their beliefs. Okay, so there's a lot of Christians out there, and there's a lot of Christian nationalists out there. All right, let's make that distinction. Okay, just like there's Republicans and then there's MAGA. That's a very distinct separation, just as Christian nationalists and Christians or people of religion are a very, separate distinction. And I wanted to talk about this because a lot of people will say, like, well, God said, and, and they'll be like, automatically, bam, it's like, oh, you're one of them. It's like, no, you know what? There are a lot of good people in this world. And a lot of them are Christians, Catholics, Buddhists, Muslim, Jewish, there's just, Hindu, those are just the main ones, right? There's lots of other different things. There's like Baha'i, there's spiritual, like where it's just non-denominational, come in and we talk about just metaphysical type things. There's all different kinds of beliefs and religious systems out there. Now, I do not personally subscribe to any organized religion anymore. I am a Catholic. I will always be a Catholic, but I'm more spiritual on the metaphysical realm. But I have to say, Pope Francis and Pope Leo have really, really brought me back to not being so ashamed of, just religion, because it's like, thank you for finally putting, this on the right side, because there was a lot of things I disagreed with. I disagreed the way they treated our LGBTQ community, where, you had to stay silent, right? Or, or just the marginalized people out there. And for the most part, I know there are a lot of churches that just really welcome people in, including the Catholic Church, but I have a lot of gay friends, and that just kind of never stuck with me, or the way they treat suicide, or the way they treat, all these different things. So, I kind of moved away for a little bit. And, yeah, so, I'm still a lapsed Catholic. I'm still very non-practicing, but, I kind of wear that hat a little more proudly now. So anyways, this comes from Grizz, Grizz, on the go. I found this on Instagram, and I really love this because this is from a point of view of a Christian. Okay, and this is why I'm saying all this stuff beforehand, and I'm sorry it's taken so long just to get to this particular, the meat of the show today. But I wanted to clarify that because whether you're religious or not, whether you believe in God or not, I want people to sit in on this, because I love what this girl has to say. She's basically, her account is basically her dogs and photography. And I follow them because I love both. I love dogs. I love photography. So, you show me a cute animal, I'm probably going to follow that on Instagram. I think I even follow a woodchuck, or what are I don't know what it's called. They're cute though. But anyways, I think his name is Chuck too. But like, you need your happy places, so, and animals are just so innocent and cute. I know they can be a little violent sometimes, but that's nature. But anyways, I wanted to read this from this perspective, because I think it's very important for people to remember that just because someone has a specific belief doesn't mean that they are cruel or mean, or, like I said, there's a very distinct difference between a Christian nationalist and a Christian. And Christian kind of covers everything across the board, right? As long as it covers God and Jesus. So whatever religion that is, it's a Christian, even Catholics, all right? But, okay, but you know what? Sorry. So again, even if you're not religious, please stay for this, because I think we need to remind ourselves that, even if you're not a believer, we still should respect other people's beliefs as long as they align to the actual teachings of the person that they're trying to quote. You cannot take a Bible and hit people with it when it's convenient for you. Okay. Most Christians are quiet. They don't sit there and get in your face about, Jesus. All right. They just they do their thing. They do their thing quietly, and not always. My mom, we would talk, and sometimes she would just go like, well, if you prayed more, and it's like, well, how do you know I don't pray? So see, there were assumptions there too. But anyways, here we go. So Grizz on the go from Instagram. This is a dog page, but I'm still human. Right now, my heart is heavy. I've stayed quiet for a long time, not because I don't care, but because I've never really known how to say this. I am a Christian, but my faith doesn't look like rules and lines. It doesn't look like hate, fear, or exclusion. It looks like trying to love people better today than I did yesterday, and standing beside those who are hurting. The Bible tells us to love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't list exceptions, not based on skin tone, not based on where someone is from, not based on who they love, not based on what they believe. Just neighbor. I am far from perfect and have certainly made my fair share of mistakes, but if one thing is clear, I want people to feel safe with me. I stand with immigrants, LGBTQIA+ lives, bodily autonomy, equality for all people, compassion over cruelty. And I stand against systems that thrive on fear and dehumanization. Jesus stood with the less than, the forgotten, the pushed aside, and the judge. And I believe he still would. I grew up watching VeggieTales, a children's show that shares Bible stories, and there's a song called I Can Be Your Friend that I think a lot of people need to be reminded of. Some of the lyrics go like this. God makes lots of people in all colors, shapes, and sizes. He loves them very much, and what we need to realize is that calling people names because they're different is wrong. Instead, we need to look on them in love and sing this song, I Can Be Your Friend. When did so many people decide that humanity stops for those who look different from them? You don't have to agree with me, but this is where I stand, and I won't be silent about compassion. This page will always be about dogs and photography, and this is not a topic I'll likely discuss often, but this account will always reflect the human behind the camera, someone who believes love should always be louder than fear and always make people feel safe. And that was from Lauren and her dogs, Grizz and Banjo. Banjo, I love that name. Muddy, you're on. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I wished you happy birthday earlier, but, and I will put it in the friends group. So sorry about that. Anyways, so that being said, I promise that the show is not going to be completely geared to the climate that we're living in right now. But, when things come up in my feeds and I feel like they're important, I want to share them. And I love that this is a perspective from somebody who is a Christian saying, look, we're not Christian nationalists. We outnumber the Christian nationalists. The Christian nationalists are just loud and in your face. Like, what is that one church? Is it the Westboro church that are just so vile and mean? And like, they're just in your face. So, in your face. But yeah, I wanted to share this. And that's why I wanted people who do not subscribe to religions, who may be an atheist or may be an agnostic, to really pay attention to this. Because just because somebody reads the Bible or watches a show called VeggieTales or, might pray or, maybe they pray before their meal and just like, oh, or praise God when they win something. My father's an agnostic and slash atheist. And I sit there and he'll be like, well, I just want to thank God. My dad's, God had nothing to do with it. And it's like, I don't think he means that God helped him win the game. I think he's saying, thank you for giving me the courage and the belief and the strength. And it's just like, it's their belief. And I get it because he's not saying it out loud. He's just saying it in the privacy of his own home, because my father had a very bad experience growing up with religion. And so, which kind of pushed him into the way that he believes now. So, honestly, I think he's more of an agnostic than an atheist, but he teeters, depending on the day. But yeah, I love everything that Lauren had to say in this. I really do, because I think she hit the nail on the head for a lot of people who are quiet, a lot of people who are Christian that don't speak out, that don't say anything. And I don't mean they have to. What I mean is they live their lives quietly. They go to church, they worship, they do wonderful things for people during the week. They kind of carry their flock, whether they're the leader of that flock or they're part of the flock. Everybody steps up as a community and helps one another. They're not out there, like I said, preaching in your face about how you're going to hell. One of my favorite things about Comic-Con, believe it or not, are all these religious crazies that come out and, they get a permit and they're allowed to stay in one little section. And I think they did that because they used to spread themselves out throughout Comic-Con. So now they just stand there and they preach on their loud horns or their, what are those things called? The megaphones. They preach on their megaphones and they sit there, you're going to hell if you do this, if you do that. And it's like, you know what? So Comic-Con is like people cosplaying a lot. I don't cosplay. I'm not talented enough to cosplay. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just really not. Although I really should start. I did once. I went as the 10th Doctor. And I did my own, I gender bended the 10th Doctor. But anyways, so there's a lot of girls in, I guess, sexy costumes. And they're just cosplaying, or maybe they're showing off their own designs, because a lot of people will kind of make, Comic-Con their own fashion show, and it's great because there's so many creative minds out there. But these people are just minding their own business, they're enjoying the atmosphere, and all of a sudden you got someone blowhorning in your face. You're going to hell. You're going to hell because you're a sinner. Yeah, you don't speak for God. Sorry. I'm pretty sure that when they go, there's going to be a special purgatory for them. And God's going to be like, really? Really? That's what you think I'm all about? Mm-mm. And that's if you're a believer. If you're not a believer, you're going to be like, yeah, nothing happens. So whatever. But anyway, I christen you all. So anyways, I just wanted to share this because, like I said, it came on my feed last night, and I was like, wow, this to me says it perfectly. And I think I'm sure that a lot of the Christians I know who, are not nationalists, Christian nationalists, would agree with a lot of what she had to say. I did share it to my stories on Instagram and Facebook, but like I said, it's Grizz, Grizz, on the go. And it's just Lauren and her dogs, and lots of photography and dogs. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful account. And kind of just, like, you find your zen in there, right? And dogs and pretty scenery. So, and I think she's in Colorado, so there's definitely no lack of scenery there. There's just a lot of beautiful scenery out in Colorado. But, in any direction that you look. So, excuse me. So yeah, not a very long show today, but I think, like I said, I think she covers it all. I love the part, I stand with immigrants, the LGBTQIA plus lives, bodily autonomy, equality for all people, compassion over cruelty. I stand against systems that thrive on fear and dehumanization. Jesus stood with the less than, the forgotten, the pushed aside, and the judged, and I believe he still would. I believe he would too. All these people saying, well, Jesus says you're going to hell. Yeah, Jesus was a hippie, guys, okay? Jesus was a snowflake. He was a radical left scum. Yes, as people like to call a lot of people who oppose their MAGA beliefs. I know, right? This is why I really want people to make the distinction also between MAGA and actual Republicans. There is a difference, just like there's a difference between Christian nationalists and actual Christians. Okay. And I don't mean to, I know that I'm kind of putting them in the, not really category, but those are people living in fear. Those are people living in fear, but they're, putting it out there as, strength and courage. No, that's not strength and courage. Strength and courage is standing up to people that actually think that Jesus would take a rock and throw it at somebody. Jesus would stand in front of the person being pelted with rocks. That's what Jesus was about. He wasn't about, like damning people. And if you want to sit there and talk about, oh, well, blah, 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 he flipped tables. Jesus went into a temple and flipped tables where people were disrespecting the temple. Come on. That's not what they were about. That's not what he was about. I mean, I still got a little bit of Catholic knowledge left in my head from all those years of school, and church with my mom. But at first, I would just say, like my Catholicism, kept me connected to my mother, and it does to some degree. But now I'm just okay saying, yeah, I'm just a non-practicing Catholic instead of a lapsed Catholic, because Pope Francis and Pope Leo gave me hope that religious leaders are going to stand up to bad things. I wonder what Pope John Paul II would think now, because he lived through World War II, and I believe he was Polish. So, he lived through World War II. He lived through a lot of what we're seeing now, the condemnation of people based on their skin color or where they're from or their, how they identify. People are always, Laura and I, older sibling and I, were watching a show last week because Pete Buttigieg was on, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, and this girl kept trying, and every time he shot her down, she'd just make up some number, like, well, 70% of the people that they're capturing are criminals. No, they're not. No, they're not. Like, if I remember my stats correctly, like 3.3% of illegal, or I should say undocumented, people here in the United States, okay, that they make up the population, 3.3%. So not a lot. And, what do you call it? And then he talked about, oh God, what was it? And, for those who don't know, Pete Buttigieg, I believe he was the one. He's gay, has a husband, kids, and he's great. He's great. I mean, he's so calm. And, they were talking about a lot of different things. And then she tried to bring up the whole, transgender thing and men playing in women's sports. Honey, I think it's like less than 3% of the people in college that want to play sports are transgender. And here's the thing, if you're on hormones and you're on, that change your body to the sex that you want to be, that is really kind of what gives you the muscle tone. That is really what kind of gives you the, the whole, body makeup. People need to learn some science, okay? I may not be totally right on that, and I'm happy to look it up if I'm wrong. But anyways, Sammy says, Jesus came down on the hypocritical religious folks, but nobody else. Some of these folks need to actually read the book they beat others over the head with. Thank you. Thank you. You cannot take a quote and say, boom. There's a kid on TikTok, or not TikTok, well, he's on TikTok, but he's on YouTube. This is where I found, I think his name is Dean Withers. I was trying to remember this the other day for older sibling, because she absolutely fell in love with Adam Mockler. And I mean, in the way that, he's just on point. He's very composed. He just kind of says it like it is. He does his research. He does his fact checking. And these two kids, I call them kids, but they're both in their early 20s. These two kids are they're very on point. And, but they'll listen and they'll talk to people. They're not sitting there yelling, la, 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 because that la, 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 la is not going to get anything done. All right. We can hate on everybody else. We can, think of it as you're standing in front of a fog, right? Or maybe smoke and fire, and people start coming out and they look bewildered. Maybe they started the fire. Okay. You know what I'm saying here? But they're coming out. Are you going to throw them back in, or are you going to say, here, let me help you? This is why I talked about what I talked about yesterday. This is why I said, what Bad Bunny said in his speech about how we have to fill this world with love. We have to meet hate with love. This is why Dr. King said that hate will not drive out hate. Only love can do that. Darkness will not drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And we have to be the people who somehow find ourselves in the middle and say, hey, you know what? Okay. Because I will say this, the one good thing that's come out of all of this crap that's happening is we wanted this country to figure out how to unite itself again. And in a very big way, it has. People don't talk enough about the people that are in the streets, but they're not all Democrats. They're not all liberals. There are Republicans out there. There are libertarians out there. There are independents, independent conservatives out there marching for the same thing because we all want our country back. We're not nationalists. We're patriots. We're not paid. Do you know why they point the finger and say they're paid? Because it has been proven that a lot of the rallies that they had before the election, people were paid to show up. And when the dude would drone on and on and on, he would start losing his crowd because they're like, hey, I got my money, I'm out. You know, a certain owner of Twitter was trying to pay people to vote, or running little lotteries saying, hey, if you vote this way, you're, entered into a chance to win $1 million. Yeah, of course, when you find marginalized people who don't have a lot of money and you're saying, hey, I'll give you $100, that's dinner, that's food, that's gas. And they don't care because it's a momentary thing that is supporting them. For instance, the King James Bible. All right. Now, I don't mean to be mean, but one of the reasons I have problems with that Bible is because it was kind of interpreted to suit a certain ruler. Witches are bad. Witches are this. Witches are that. No, they're not. Some of them might be. But religious people can be bad too. Democrats can be bad. Republicans can be bad. Independents can be bad. Yeah. There's always that small percentage of people who are going to ruin it for everybody. That one bad apple, right, in the barrel. But that doesn't mean the whole barrel is bad. It just means it's one bad apple. And we can't let that one bad apple spoil the rest of the barrel. We have to stop looking at people like they are the problem. Okay? There's a certain group that is the problem. Yes. But when you trickle down, when you filter, when you feed people's fears, when you feed people's anger, when you feed people's, sense of, I don't know, I want to say indignation, but that's not the word I was looking for. It just really sounded good and pretty and big. But it's exactly that. It's exactly like Sammy said. Jesus came down on the hypocrites, the hypocritical religious. So if you think that you spouting your shit, you're going to hell, you're a sinner, you're this, you're that, you are not my judge and creator. You are not my maker. My mom and I didn't agree on a lot of things for a long time. Even the path I chose. Well, I just want to do blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I'm fine. I still have a very good relationship with God. I may not go to church. I said, I don't feel like I need to sit in a building for that. And if you do, I'm not berating that. I'm not belittling that. It's just not for me. I have my own relationship. But I wanted to do this show because I have so many Christian friends who sit there and people be like, oh, well, you believe in God? No, we can't look at people like that. Okay? Because there's good ones out there. They're the ones who read the book. They're the ones who see Jesus for what he was teaching. They're the ones who help the marginalized, who welcome in the people who may identify differently, whether it's their own sex or the partner that they choose. And it's not different to them. It's just who they love. They love who they love. They welcome in people of different skin tones, different hair colors, different, hairstyles, people with different eye colors. They're a very eclectic group of people. So why? I'm with Sammy. I think the people who run around calling themselves Christians, who are Christian nationalists, really need to open the book and stop, quoting what they really don't understand or parroting. I mean, I told older sibling, I said a lot of them are, well, I shouldn't even say a parrot. I feel like I'm offending a parrot because I feel like parrots can think for themselves. Animals that can, but they're like mockingbirds, right? They just repeat everything they hear. They hate people based on what the person at the top of the trickle down said to hate. Think of it as like those big champagne towers, right? If you know what you're doing, you're going to hit every glass and you're not going to spill a drop. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get champagne everywhere. The tower is probably going to fall apart. And then everybody at the bottom is going to be pissed because everything broke on them and they're all wet now, right? And that's kind of what I see a lot of these followers in that particular group doing. They're just angry and they just want to fight everybody because well, how can you say that about this guy? he's our leader. No, he's not no leader. He's too busy, kowtowing to all of his, I mean, whoever thought that America would have oligarchs, right? Like the Russian ones. Maybe we always had them. But that's, circling back, because I think this is the point I was trying to make. It's weird when I go live, okay? My brain just spews out whatever that, I'm thinking it, but I'm kind of thinking it before being able to process it. And I think what I wanted to say earlier, which I just forgot my thought again. Oh my God. Seriously. What was I just talking about, guys? Well, they really are for themselves. They really are just trying, like this administration isn't about anything other than making themselves rich and ruling this country with an iron fist. Okay. We are not Nazi Germany. And I know people don't like when people make that comparison because they're like, well, just because I believe in this administration doesn't mean blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't mean you are. But you're the silent majority that stayed quiet in Germany when everything else around them was happening, when their neighbors were being stolen from their homes, when, the Gestapo was kicking in doors and shooting people in the streets and, basically just judging a person for their background, their race, their ethnicity, and their religious beliefs. Because, see, it wasn't just Jewish people that were killed in the Holocaust. People who obviously sheltered them, defended them were. Catholics were. Gay people were. People of color did not fare well. But the majority, of course, were the Jewish population who were very marginalized. But, we've had, 80 years now. 80 years of documentation telling us what not to do. So if you're going to stand on your Bible and you're going to preach at me, you better know what the hell you're talking about. I admit I don't know much about the Bible, but I also don't sit there and quote it unless I'm trying to quote, love your neighbor as yourself, which means basically treat your neighbor as you would want to be treated. Because this is some good stuff. These are basic common principles that we should all live with. Don't covet your neighbor's belongings. Okay. I want to say wife, but come on, that's outdated. Don't covet your neighbor's anything. If you like it, earn it. But don't be jealous because they have something you want that you don't have. Oh. So anyways, I'm sorry. My brain kind of squirreled on me and, I forgot. I'm still fighting off a spiral, so I do apologize for that. But, even older sibling, I talked to her this morning and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, this is just me right now in this climate that we live in. And I have to figure out how to move through it. I have to get back into my center and figure out where, I fit in all of this, because like I said, I don't want this show to constantly be talking about these sorts of things. I want to put good stuff out there. I mean, this is good stuff. That's not what I mean. I want to put like positive things out there because I feel like the way I can help change what we're on is by just putting it out there about loving one another, about being neighborly, about doing good things for one another, or even just going out there and being a good human. I have a friend that when she would drop her son off at school, or when they separate now because he's older and he's in college, but when, like she always says, be a good human. And I love that. I've loved that for years. All the years that, she would sit there and say, Bubba and I had a conversation today, and it's just like, that's her nickname for him. But it's just kind of like, yeah, be a good human. You don't need a Bible. You don't need a religion. You just need some empathy and compassion. And if religion drives that for you, that's wonderful. But if religion is driving you to be hateful and spiteful, that's not religion. That's you feeding into a fear, your own fears, and putting it out there as, basically being just, I don't know, is indignant the word? That word is just flying around in my head right now. It's like doing a little tornado thing in there. So, just being obstinate. We'll go for the other 25-cent word. But anyway, I think I need this. Ding. Shelly Marie needs her brain. Her brain. Oh my God, my head. But oh, I'm sorry, guys. Anyways, I'm going to let you go. All right. So I said what I had to say. Follow Grizz on the go if you want to. She has no idea who I am from the next person, but it's, if you love dogs and you love beautiful scenery, follow it. Just, like I said, I follow so many people on Instagram, and most of them are cats, dogs, otters, wildlife sanctuary. Like I said, I think I follow a woodchuck named Chuck. Sammy, was that you that showed me that, Muddy? Were you the one that somebody tagged me in it one day? Oh, might have been. I don't know. But he's so cute. He's so cute. I've never seen this woodchuck chuck wood. So he chucks a lot of carrots, but if he is a woodchuck, I don't know. But anyways, just go out there and be a good human. All right. Simple. Be a good human. Okay, wait, I was going to close it off. You know where to find me. All right. So be a good human. Have a great day.